So I think I'm losing my hair, and that comes with the territory. The territory being age. Although I knew some people in high school that were losing their hair, like you know more than anybody else I've ever seen. So I mean, it might be a rarity, but like it happened. So talk about antinatalism, right? And just kind of oh, the uh, the things you have to go through when you think about antinatalism. And I have been thinking about antinatalism a lot in the last couple days. And it was definitely emotionally driven because I woke up early and just basically thought about it. And I mean, I had some kind of emotional impetus to think about antinatalism, but and I'm not saying emotions should be the driving force of everything we do. But it's not like you can deny that we have emotions. Emotions are a scientific fact. I mean, let's put it that way. Um, Anyway, I guess the point being is like just to reiterate, like I mean, antinatalism, while I don't think it's ever going to be the mainstream thought process for people. It never will be. I mean, there would have to be some sort of like calamitous kind of event like that like climate change or something, and then we would have to have we can't spin this on a dime. Like I mean, we would have to really think about antinatalism in terms of politics and the effects of a lower birth rate, et cetera, et cetera. So antinatalism in terms of implementation would take, oh God, hundreds of years, I imagine. Like, I mean, I mean, look how long it would, according to Naomi Klein, capitalism as a way of life, and probably the most successful way of life we've had so far, is probably a slowly, painfully dying thing. And I mean, I don't necessarily believe with Naomi Klein. Like, I mean, I do think that, I think that capitalism is, I don't want to say a way of life. I mean, it's definitely a very calculated thing. Based on um, but anyway, I mean there's even philosophers that write about capitalism being a religion, um, in terms of its um, having to atone for certain things or whatever, and there's different people that see capitalism as in different ways. Um, so these kinds of social changes, you think about maybe even something like women's rights, there might be the semblance of a dime, maybe a loony, where people change things when it comes to social norms and things like that. But anyway, going back to the whole antinatalist thing, like I mean, it would take some real social engineering to actually bring about an you know, um, antinatalist uh, framework for all of society, and then I mean, maybe globalization might actually aid in basically changing people's opinions and things like that very quickly because when you talk about antinatalism, you're not exactly talking about one person suffering. You're actually talking about how we have relationships with other people and other people relate to us. I mean, it's not in a way, it's kind of like, oh, woe was me, I wish I was never born, and I'm sure a lot of people think of it that way. Um, in whatever sense you kind of want to think about in a pessimistic or anti-pessimistic, anti-pessimistic. Anyway, so it comes across as, oh, woe is me, a very individual, selfish individual kind of need, like, oh, I'm suffering and I wish I wasn't born, and and your counter argument is, well, everybody else has to deal with life. Why can't you if you're an antinatalist? Like, I mean, like, what's your big complaint? So I'm saying that it's not that I want to commit suicide. I don't. Um, and that comes with, I mean, forgetting euthanasia for a second, like blah blah blah. It's not a different issue, but it's related, but it's kind of outside what I'm talking about. But um, suicide comes with a whole bunch of other domino effects that I think would severely hurt people. I mean, there's systems and processes built up around you, right? Like I mean, you're worth something. Take a cog out of the system, and what happens, right? Anyway, I'm not sure about me though. I mean, I have my little blog, so I don't know. So yeah, it would just take a long time for any sort of volitional effort to make a change in society, especially when it comes to antinatalism. And it it's such a taboo topic that people are so morally tied to life. I mean, and there's a religious aspect to it too. I mean, it's life is God-given. It's similar to GMOs, right? Like people talk about the immorality of GMOs because on some level they see it as messing with God's design, God's plan. So I mean, life is just a very godly thing, and I think it's a legacy way of thinking when it comes to all of life, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I mean, we do still believe that we are special and unique, and I mean, we definitely are unique. I mean, but I mean, not even in a cosmological sense, but even in the sense of just like, coming from the earth, we believe we're somehow above it a little bit. Like we think we're not exactly at one with the earth. And there's even some sort of like, when people talk about like pseudo-science, socio-scientific understandings of what human life is and us being viruses or having some sort of like um, asteroidal origin, or like, I mean, our proteins, or the beginnings of life actually came from extra solar sources. um that Oumuamua that just visited, we were looking for it. I mean, it definitely shows us looking for these extraterrestrial origins of human life. But to think of us being just the product of, I don't want to say accident because that gets misconstrued, but um, I'm kind of lacking for better words, and my vocabulary is shit. But I should buck up on that. But life as it is, just out of the circumstances that bore us, as opposed to any divine intervention, is something people struggle with. It doesn't hit them as right, because why do we have all this technology? Like, why are we able to build technology? Like, why, anyway, so we have this very core understanding of life, and core understanding of the importance of life, et cetera, et cetera. And that's difficult to change. And that's what antinatalism basically suggests. And I was actually surprised on initial reading to see that the Buddha actually thought this way. Um, Goes to show you why Eastern philosophy isn't all that popular, right? Maybe, I don't know, maybe that's one of the reasons. But yeah, antinatalism, to think about antinatalism is to basically reimagine what society is like, what human beings are like, what we're capable of and not capable of. And I just want to reiterate, I mean, there are advocates for antinatalism, and it hit me the other day that, a lot of what this sort of intellectual dark web kind of talks about, or even like the new center of politics talks about, is people being able to withstand criticism, or withstand, the criticism of ideas, and the criticism of their actions, et cetera, which we're kind of losing, especially on the left and the right too. But the left is known for actually not handling criticism very well. But I'm not saying that humans are incapable of handling criticism or anything like that. I'm just saying, as a matter of fact, the grain, or the DNA of life is one of suffering. I'm not saying that that will change or that should change. I mean, there's probably a whole debate on this whole thing too, about GMOs, et cetera, et cetera. But like, I'm not saying that those things will change and need to change. And there's suffering with various causes. Like, I mean, and certain causes are just clear affronts to human dignity, and et cetera, et cetera. But I'm saying the DNA of life, the DNA of human existence, and even animal existence, is actually very, very tied to suffering. I mean, it's built into us: fear, and jealousy, and anger, and violence. I mean, these things are inside us. You know what I mean? Um, so I'm not saying, to change those things would be changing what is human, but um, those emotions will never go away. So I'm not saying that, it's kind of like Gad Saad's like comic intervention, right? Like, he basically said once that, humor is a way of handling the unending ugliness of the world. Now, I don't see Gad Saad as sort of like somebody who can't take criticism or who can't dish out criticism, but there is an unending ugliness to the world, and he's right about that. But he's not an advocate for basically shutting conversations down. So I mean, he's kind of one example of how we play that line. But that's I hope I'm trying to I hope I'm conveying to you what I mean by the suffering of a human being. It's not, I'm not saying it's something that we create. It's just very part of us. So and there's, with antinatalism, I think there's this kind of like, in my research so far, is this kind of like, in its infancy, I'm getting this notion of basically the idea of using antinatalism not as a nihilistic kind of approach to humanity, but basically supporting humanity and looking and understanding what people go through in their lives and how they handle it. Um, but but yeah, I mean, I don't know how effective it is. I mean, antinatalism right away is sort of like this thing that people just do not want to talk about. It just seems unnatural and anti-human, and forgetting that it applies to animals as well, trees even. Like, I mean, you know, depending on how much consciousness things have. Like, I mean, rocks might have consciousness for all we know. Thank you, Linda McQuaig. Apparently, I don't take that was a slight, but don't take it seriously. Oh, well, not a slight. That was a joke, um, kind of. But anyway, look, I heard some stuff. Anyway, I'm joking. I'm joking. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Bye.